Today we're here at Truman Lake. It's one of my favorite lakes in the world. I grew up fishing here and actually won a boat here when I was younger and kind of made me want to be a professional fisherman. So got a lot of history here and it's real close to home, so I always enjoy fishing here. Truman Lake is 55,000 acres in size and it can expand greatly when we get heavy amounts of rain. It's primarily used as a flood control lake for Lake of the Ozarks and the surrounding rivers. It's fed by multiple rivers, the Grand, the Osage, the Pomme de Terre River, and the Tebow River as well. Right now we're on the lower end of the lake. Down here we've got a lot clearer water, a lot of islands, structure fishing, and really stable water conditions for this lake. As you get up here into these creeks and river arms, this middle creek arm here is the Grand River. It's a huge creek arm, lots of twists, turns, and pockets and creeks running off of that. And you have a ton of backwater up here. You can go exploring for days. There's lots of ponds and strip pits, different creek channels and things that you can get your boat into and catch fish that are untapped, possibly never seen a lure before. And honestly, treacherous places to run as you get up in these upper ends of these creek and river arms. So as we go up here closer to the dam again, we've got the Tebow arm of the lake, a little bit deeper water, stable water conditions in here as well, lots of good fishing opportunities throughout the year. And then the main river that feeds this lake is the Osage River. So as we come down here, you can see the Osage is very long, huge river arm, lots of creeks in there. And again, we have lots of backwaters. You can go exploring for days and get into some areas with some untapped fish and really great fishing opportunities in the main Osage River there. So Truman Lake is a flood control lake. It's managed by the Corps of Engineers. So unlike Lake of the Ozarks, my home lake, it has almost zero boat docks besides some major marinas that are on the lake. The primary cover here is standing timber. There's also a lot of points, structure, brush piles here on this lower end, so a little bit deeper down here. For the most part, we're out here targeting these trees. As the lake comes up, you get a lot of this flooded cover in the lake, so you can fish flooded grass, flooded willow trees, bushes. Came up and smoked that. The primary forage at Truman Lake are threadfin and gizzard shad. There's an abundance of forage here, tons of shad, and there's also a lot of crawfish. The water clarity here on the lower end stays pretty stable. You're looking at 2 to 5 foot of visibility most of the time. But as you get up into the upper ends of these creeks and rivers, the water clarity usually gets to a foot, sometimes less. If you're traveling to Truman Lake, Warsaw, Missouri is right down here on the lower end of the lake. If you want to fish the upper areas of the lake, Clinton, Missouri is a great place to stay. Both Warsaw and Clinton have a lot of lodges, hotels, gas stations, restaurants, so great places for anglers to stay while they're here at Truman Lake. Truman Lake is really accessible. It's a Corps of Engineer lake and there is a lot of Corps ramps throughout the lake. So no matter what area that you're fishing, you can find a ramp, a campground, and somewhere to stay really close by. So let's break it down with the season, starting with the pre-spawn. Here on the lower end of the lake is usually where I like to start my search in the pre-spawn. So the pre-spawn is going to start in late February and go all the way through mid-April. A lot of these fish are going to come off the main lake and they're going to set up on some of these main lake and secondary points that are leading into these bigger creeks and coves. So they'll follow this creek channel here and set up on some of these points leading into these creeks, and they'll suspend around the timber or get on the bottom on some of these rockier points leading into these creeks. And then from there, they'll follow that creek channel back here and set up on some of these creek channel swings. A lot of these will be 45-degree or bluffy type banks with bigger rocks and warm up really fast. So they're gonna stage here on some of these creek channel swings before moving shallow into some of these spawning pockets. So those are the kind of areas I'm looking for in the pre-spawn. All right, let's talk about pre-spawn fishing here at Truman Lake. We're on one of those points that I described earlier. This is just a secondary point leading into a spawning pocket. It's got a nice 45-degree taper to it, and you can see it's got some standing timber as well. So the fish love the standing timber. They suspend in the springtime, and so they'll get next to some of these trees and suspend around these points. My first pick, especially if you got good water clarity, is the jerkbait. This is the XPS stare down, and I like the longer build jerkbait around some of this timber, primarily because it goes through the timber a little better. It just deflects off of some of those limbs. So you want to use some brighter colored baits. This is, your typical table rock shad, works everywhere here in the Ozarks. This is a great pick. And then, when I'm fishing closer to the bank, the jig is always a good choice. This is the Bass Pro Shops XPS finesse football jig. Green pumpkin. This is just a little twin tail, 4-inch grub. I'm gonna fish that on 14 to 17 to 20 pound Bass Pro Shops fluorocarbon. And then the third option is gonna be the spinnerbait. This is a Trophy Bass Company Ozark Flash spinnerbait. And just cover water with this. Get on those channel swing banks, especially when the water gets into the upper 40s, low 50s, this really starts to excel. These three baits will get the job done for you throughout the spring. So spawning season here at Truman Lake typically starts in late April and can run all the way through June, depending on water fluctuation and water levels. These fish typically though, May is the prime time. And these fish are gonna work their way down these creeks and channel swings, and they're gonna start setting up to spawn in these coves and in the backs of these creeks that are associated with those channel swings. Typically in the spring, the water is a little bit dingy from spring rains, and so sight fishing can be difficult at times. So what we're doing is we're going into these pockets, we're looking for gravel and smaller rock that's associated with those channel swings, and we're usually fishing the first stump or tree off the bank. So we're doing a lot of blind casting. I call it blind bed fishing, and you're taking your soft plastics or jigs and you're throwing them up there in areas that look like they should hold a spawning bass. So the key is just to cover water and hit some of these pockets, the backs of some of these creeks that are associated with these channel swings, and just look around for the best cover available, and those fish will be spawning nearby. These creeks and channel swings are primary places for them to go and spawn. Ooh, the males are up there, ain't they? That's a nice healthy fish. All right, so let's talk about the spawn here on Truman Lake. Typically, these fish like to move back from these secondary and primary points, channel swings, and they'll slide back into these coves that have a lot flatter taper, a lot of gravel on the bank, and some mixed rock, and they'll get next to the first couple stumps off of the bank or trees off of the bank. And they like the trees that have a little bit bigger root system typically. We've got stained water, so sight fishing can be hard, so we're doing a lot of flipping. We're just flipping to likely targets and areas where we think they're spawning, and baits like this prodigy bug here can be really good. So I've got this on a Bass Pro Shops 3/8 ounce tungsten weight, a 4/0 Hayabusa flipping hook, and I'm flipping this into the heaviest cover I can find, areas where I think that they're spawning, and kind of dead sticking it a little bit. You want to let your bait sit in there a little bit longer during the spawn. He's sitting right next to that little laydown, a little bit of gravel, getting ready to spawn. The next bait I'm going to show you is the 5 3/8 inch Bass Pro Shops Sticko. This is one of my favorite baits throughout the spawning season, no matter what lake I'm on, and just a great bait in general throughout the country. So black with a blue tip is one of my favorite colors. I've got this on a 3/16 ounce weight, and I've got a 4/0 Hayabusa offset worm hook, and it's one of my go-to baits. All right, next we have the Bass Pro Shops XPS Chatterbomb. I use this during the spawning season to cover water. It's all about making multiple casts past those pieces of covers. I love this orange type color in the spring. Something that's gonna stand out in a little bit more stained water is always gonna excel on this lake in the spring. Let's talk about after the spawn. These fish have spawned in these pockets and now they're trying to work their way out after laying their eggs. So a lot of structure fishing to be had, especially on the lower end of this lake. And there's several different things you can do in the post-spawn period. So starting out, a lot of these fish are going to start suspending around that timber, getting around the bases of the timber, and anywhere from 4 to 12 foot of water. And they're going to work their way out to some of these structure locations. You can see here on the map, these fish are going to work their way out of these coves. They're going to suspend around timber on some of these secondary and main lake points, and they're eventually going to work their way out to the main lake around some of these structure areas. So on the lower end of the lake, you can see we've got a lot of good structure areas. We've got road beds, big points, expansive flats, and a lot of channel swings. So as we come up here, you can see more channel swings, more road beds, and flooded timber. So primary targets this time of year are going to be these offshore places that feature rock piles, road beds, underwater structure in that 6 to 12 foot range. The fish are going to live around that standing timber all year on this lake. So fishing some of that flooded timber on expansive flats, whether it's isolated flats like this that have isolated cover, or along some of these deeper channel swings, flooded timber is always an option here. Again, that 6 to 12 foot range seems to be really key for the flooded timber fish. And you want to look for the biggest tree that has the most amount of cover for it. Those fish are going to seek out the heaviest cover available. They'll get on these flats, they'll get on these channel swings, and they'll also get in brush piles that are around points, channel swings, and flats as well. There's a lot of man-made brush and brush put in by the Corps of Engineers that's planted throughout the lake, especially on this lower end, and that can be prime targets when you're fishing for bass. Target that 6 to 12 foot and you're going to be around some fish. Summertime fishing on Truman Lake is all about structure fishing and flipping big timber around deep water. And behind me we have a great example of an ideal structure place here at Truman Lake. We've got a long tapering point that comes off of a channel swing, and it just kind of tapers into deep water, has a few stumps and even a couple brush piles on it. So my favorite bait to start with to target these areas is a 3/4 ounce XPS football jig. The 3/4 ounce jig, green pumpkin or black and blue, just depending on the water clarity. And I've got a Prodigy Craw trailer on there. It displaces a lot of water. So this is my first choice when fishing out deep here at Truman Lake, 20-pound Bass Pro Shops XPS fluorocarbon line. The heavier line on this lake is really important because we've got a lot of trees. All right, next up, we've got the Carolina rig. This is a really good technique on this lake. We've got a lot of long tapering flats and points, a lot of road beds and things like that. So you can drag the bottom, cover a lot of water, and get a lot of bites. You can just throw your favorite soft plastic on here. This is a 5 3/8 inch sticko like we were showing you earlier. But the important part here is the weight in these beads. So this weight's gonna slide back and forth, and it's gonna click against these beads as it's dragging across the bottom. Great technique when you're out here fishing the cover that's on these points and long flats. A great way to cover water and catch a bunch of fish here at Truman Lake. Next up, we've got one of my favorites, and that's just a big worm. So this is just a 10-inch worm, and this is a traditional summertime favorite amongst most anglers here at Truman Lake. Traditionally, we flip this worm into standing timber. 9 to 12-inch worm is typically the size we use. I like a 5/0 114 offset Hayabusa hook, anywhere from a 3/16 ounce to a 1/2 ounce weight if you're fishing real deep on the bottom around brush. But usually I'll start with a 1/4 ounce or 5/16 ounce weight to let that bait kind of slowly fall in front of these fish that are suspended in timber. Fishing in the fall here at Truman Lake can be phenomenal. We're gonna go up into some of these creeks and river arms. We're gonna primarily target some of these flats and the backs of some of these bays that have a majority of the shad on them. A lot of the cover that we're gonna be fishing is just gonna be shallow flats that have rocky banks and shallow stumps on some of these flats. So we're really targeting the bigger stumps, the bigger trees, isolated timber, and looking for these areas like we see here that have a lot of red on them, where there's a deep water close by. It runs close to some of these flats. These fish are gonna move out of that deep water and up onto these flats that have shad on them, into the backs of some of these coves, and we're gonna fish extremely shallow looking for shad, going in and out of these coves, and you know, really fishing some of these bigger flats that have a majority of the shad on them. So fall of the year is one of my favorite times to fish Truman Lake. The fish get shallow and they get in the backs of these major creeks, on tree rows, and any kind of cover that's on these flats. So behind me, we've got a great example of that. We're kind of at the end of a major creek, and we've got a nice big flat here with a bunch of timber and good targets to throw our moving baits around. So we'll start with a bait that we haven't talked about yet, and that is a squarebill crankbait. This one right here is a homemade crankbait. It's similar to the old original balsa Bagley baits. And I really like a wooden bait on this lake because, as you can see, we've got a ton of timber, and these baits typically back away from the cover really well. So I like to fish this around the trees almost exclusively. One of my favorite baits to throw in the fall here is a buzzbait. This is just a 3/8 ounce Bass Pro Shops buzzer beater buzzbait, and I've got a soft plastic trailer on the back of there. Anything with a little bit of action that's gonna increase the weight of this and help the castability will work just fine. So typically black is my favorite color. That gold blade on this black bait seems to produce exceptionally well here on Truman Lake. And I'm just getting on these flats, getting on points, and just covering a lot of water, getting around these big shad and trying to get a big bite. So I try to keep it in my hand as much as possible throughout the fall. Next up, we have the spinnerbait again. This is the Trophy Bass Company Ozark Flash spinnerbait in white and chartreuse. It's my favorite color to go with no matter what spinnerbait that I'm throwing. A lot of these shad are big in the fall that they're feeding on, and so you're replicating a gizzard shad with this bait most of the time. I'm fishing it around the standing timber just like I am the squarebill crankbait. I'm trying to make contact with as many trees as I can on some of these deeper banks and just get the bait down in the water column where these fish are sitting at. Let's talk about winter fishing here at Truman Lake. It's a little bit different than the fall. These fish are gonna start moving their way off of some of these flats, but they're gonna continue feeding up all the way through December. These fish are gonna remain extremely active, getting ready for a long winter. And they're gonna stay on some of these flats, and they're gonna start moving more out towards the main lake, getting on some of these bluffy channel swings, some of these island tips and things like that, a little bit closer to the main lake. We're looking for large schools of bait, and we're using our live scope to see the fish in the trees, see the fish roaming around following bait. They don't like to move a whole long ways to get where they're going here because they live in that timber, and they're gonna get out here off these points, they're gonna suspend, and you can target them with a variety of baits. Lots of good fishing opportunities here in the wintertime. Fishing in the wintertime at Truman Lake can be really good as long as you've got some good water clarity. Typically, the rains are light and we've got some stable conditions, and the jerkbait is, again, one of my favorite baits to throw on them this time of year. The fish are gonna get on a little bit steeper banks like you see behind me. We've got a lot more vertical taper here. This is a big creek channel swing going back into a major creek, and we fish them throwing this jerkbait. This is the XPS stare down jerkbait, and I'm gonna throw that on anywhere from 10 to 14 pound Bass Pro Shops XPS fluorocarbon line. I've got that on a 7-foot medium action cranking stick with a 6:8 to 1 gear ratio carbon light reel. Great setup for the winter and pre-spawn here on this lake. The next bait I'm gonna select for the winter time here at Truman Lake is the finesse football jig from Bass Pro Shops. This is a 7/16 ounce Bass Pro Shops finesse football jig. It's got 14-pound XPS fluorocarbon line on there, a little lighter than I like to throw typically on these timbered lakes, but you know, you want a finesse presentation, you want to keep this bait on the bottom, and I'm going to work it slowly down these channel banks. I'm going to trail that bait with some kind of a finesse trailer. This is just a 4-inch Bass Pro Shops twin tail grub. In the wintertime, that's basically all you need. Something to cover the middle of the water column, which is this jerkbait, and then something to get down on the bottom for when those fish are lethargic and hanging close to the bottom. Truman Lake, one of my favorite lakes to come to. I come here as often as I can, and you should too. It presents a lot of good fishing opportunities, and it's the ideal fishing lake. There's not a lot of recreational traffic out here, and just a fun place to fish.